From the patient files of Dr. William Wickman, director of Hillbrook Insane Asylum. Patient 297, Alexander Beeks, aka the Dreamer. Now this is a very peculiar case indeed. So peculiar in fact, I brought this case before a panel in Switzerland last week. This patient is simply a psychiatric marvel. 297 suffers from a completely unprecedented mental illness. No similar case has ever been encountered before. I have to say I'm quite excited about this and what it might bring to Hillbrook. At times like these, we really need happy news. So you're of course dying to hear just what is the matter with 297. Well, I'll tell you. Patient 297 suffers from what we here at Hillbrook have dubbed reverse dreaming. I'll see if we can't get a copyright on that term. What reverse dreaming means is that the patient does not experience dreams while asleep. Instead, he experiences them in his awake state. Yes, quite strange indeed. In fact, the patient seems to be in a state of dreaming for most of his time awake. He has no idea who I really am, and have gone from calling me his father to thinking that I am Nicolas Cage. He once thought we were making a movie together. Examining his brainwaves while asleep, we have indeed determined that he never dreams in a sleeping state, only when awake. So far, we are completely clueless as to how this happened to him. We can't get any sensible answers out of him after all. I can't possibly imagine that 297 has suffered from this his entire life, as up until a few months ago, he seemed to live a completely normal life, something which is impossible in his current state. He doesn't seem to understand what he's done either, the murder he committed. He acts as if she's still alive, sometimes even thinks one of the nurses is her, and tries to get a bit too friendly with them. Well, I guess I'll have to tell you his story. However, I will tell you his story the way he saw it, through his reverse dream state. Alexander Beeks woke up one early morning like he always did. It was time to go to work. After brushing his teeth, showering, eating a small breakfast and drinking a cup of much-needed coffee, Alex carefully approached his closet. He didn't like his closet. He was very wary of it. It had been like that for a while. Alex couldn't quite remember how long. Was it days? Weeks? It actually felt more like months. Could it really have been months? He couldn't even remember a time when his closet hadn't been like this. You see, to put it simply, there was a monster inside his closet. Yeah, a monster inside his closet. Alex had no idea what it was or how it got in there. At times like these, standing in front of that closet with sweaty armpits and shaky hands, it felt like the thing had always been in there. But he knew it hadn't. He couldn't really remember a time when it hadn't, but he knew it just the same. Alex had never gotten a real good look at it, as he naturally kept away from the closet. He had gotten a few glimpses of it though. He had seen dark, greenish tentacles once. Once he had seen claws, long, sharp claws. On numerous occasions he had heard a hollow alien roar come from within that confined space. It was a sickening sound that made him feel empty inside. Whatever the thing was, it was some kind of creature, a bizarre creature of unspecified origin and nature. Alex would love to just never go inside that closet, but he kinda had to. He couldn't go to work in his underwear after all. He needed his clothes, and they were in there with the monster. Luckily, he had been able to snag a suit once, a light gray suit, as well as a white shirt, from the closet before the creature could get to him. He didn't know how long ago this was, but it felt like he had been wearing the same suit to work for ages now. What would his coworkers think? Wearing the same clothes every day? No, that simply did not work. So once in a while, Alex would try his luck with the closet once again. Maybe he'd be able to snag another suit, or at least another shirt. Sometimes he hoped he would even find the closet empty of the monster that is. This time felt like it could be just that. He stood completely silent, pressing his ear against the closet door. Not a sound was heard from within. No snarling, no roars. Still, that didn't really mean anything. It could be quiet on purpose, waiting for Alex to open the door, lull him into a false sense of security, and then pound on him, or extend its tentacles and drag him into the dark closet, shutting the door behind him. Alex had to try though, so he slowly turned the door handle and carefully began to pull the door open. Still no sound. With the door standing ajar, Alex peeked inside. He could see nothing but black darkness. he had to open the door a little bit more to let in some light, so he did. He could now see the front of the closet. A few shirts and suits were visible hanging on their hangers. The back of the closet was still completely drenched in darkness, however. Slowly, he reached in a shivering hand, going for the closest suit. If he just grabbed it and then quickly slammed the door shut, the monster, if still in there, would be none the wiser. Alex's fingers were barely an inch away from the hanging suit. He could almost feel the fabric. Then, from somewhere within the darkness of the back of the closet, an inhuman creature roared. An alien sound unlike anything of this world. Alex froze like a stiff, terrified. A greenish tentacle then shot out from the darkness, going for his hand. Alex quickly pulled the hand away and slammed the door shut. Well, the same gray suit and white shirt it was then. Alex did not take his car to work. He didn't have a car, nor did he take the bus. There was no bus. Alex walked to work. He exited his apartment building and stepped out into the street. It was a beautiful, bright, sunny day. Birds were chirping and the laughter of playing children could be heard. Still, Alex couldn't see anyone. The entire street was completely empty. He paid no attention to it though and began to make his way to work. As he traveled through his neighborhood, Alex didn't spot a single human being. He could hear the ambient noise of people everywhere, including cars and car horns, but nothing was in sight. Eventually, he reached the center of the city, downtown. His destination lay here somewhere. In one of these tall skyscrapers, Alex would find his work. Even here, the streets were completely empty. Looking around himself, he also noticed that no one was visible in any of the building's countless windows. Not a soul was present. The same couldn't be said for the bustling noise of a big city. That was all there. People talking, yelling, the deafening sounds of heavy traffic. Still, none of it all really bothered Alex too much. Sure, he did find it odd, but not any cause for alarm. This is just how it was sometimes. Nothing to do but accept it. Finally, after 2 hours of walking, Alex found his workplace. A giant skyscraper in the sea of giant skyscrapers. He couldn't believe it took him so long. It hadn't taken this long in the past. Not what he could remember anyway. Alex shrugged it off and entered the building. He found the front reception just as empty as the entire city seemed to be. Then took the elevator up to his floor, the 42nd floor. The ride went surprisingly fast. After walking through a few hallways, Alex found his office. Or rather, it was a tiny cubicle in an ocean of identical such cubicles. There seemed to be hundreds of them, stretching as far as the eye could see. None of them were occupied, however. The entire building appeared to be abandoned. Unlike outside though, noise was also absent in here. It was dead silent, like a ghost town. Alex half expected a tumbleweed to come rolling past. Still, he settled in his tiny cubicle regardless, and switched on his computer. It took a real long time for the damn thing to boot up. Cheap company supplying their workers with such subpar equipment. While the machine slowly hummed to life like a dying elderly person waking up in the morning, Alex took the opportunity to leisurely goof off. He spun around on his office chair and threw his tired feet up on the tiny cubicle desk. A tray of pens were knocked over as he did, falling to the floor. Alex didn't really care. 20 minutes later, the computer had finally finished booting up. Alex cracked his fingers and was just about to get to work when he suddenly realized he had no idea what he was supposed to do. What was his job again? Some kind of office work, obviously, but what exactly? He realized he didn't even know the name of the company. If only someone had been around, he could have asked them. He then actually yelled out, checking to see if anyone could hear him. The reply he got was dead silence. Of course. Alex sat there for maybe half an hour just staring at the computer screen, trying to figure something out. Something did eventually come to him, a vague thought. Alex then ran with his thought, opened up a blank document, and began to type down whatever entered his mind. Somehow it all felt right. Of course, if you would have asked him what he had written down, he couldn't quite have told you. After 15 minutes of this, he stopped. He looked at what he had written and at the same time understood and didn't understand it. A noise was then heard, the first noise he'd heard in the building that day. The noise continued, getting nearer, growing louder. It was the sound of approaching footsteps, and not just any footsteps, but a woman walking in high heels. Alex jumped up from his office chair and went out in the hallway towards the footsteps. As he did, the sound surprisingly grew more distant, as if the person had begun walking in the opposite direction. Alex followed them. They grew even more distant. As he turned a corner, he got a brief distant glimpse of the owner of the high heels. He only saw her back, yet recognized her immediately. It was Midge, his supervisor. Alex called out her name, but she was gone behind a hallway corner. He ran up to where she had disappeared and looked down the hallway she had taken. Nothing. No one was in sight. Then the sound of footsteps began again, the same ones, now coming from where he had just been. They were getting louder, coming his way. Alex quickly made his way back and turned the corner. At the end of the hallway, he could again see Midge, but only for a split second, as she yet again took a turn down a corner, walking in the opposite direction. "Mr. Beeks!" a voice then exclaimed loudly from right behind him. Alex was startled and jumped. Turning around, he saw that it was Midge. Confused, he began to stutter and awkwardly gesture towards the hallway where he had just seen her a second ago. She wasn't really interested in any of it though and blared at him sternly. That's when Alex noticed that Midge was also his ex-girlfriend Sarah. That was strange. He had never noticed that before. Midge Sarah then began to scold Alex over some report he was supposed to have finished days ago. That's when he remembered. Of course, the report. That's what he was supposed to work on. And it was what he had been doing too. The document he started writing just before. It was the report Midge now spoke of. Alex put on a diplomatic smile and began to explain how he had the report on his computer. Not quite finished yet, but getting there. If Midge wanted to see it, he was more than happy to show it to her. She was angry it wasn't finished yet and said that naturally she should see it. In fact, she was ordering him to show it to her. Alex slapped on an apologetic look and began to lead the way. When they got to his cubicle, he noticed that it wasn't a tiny cubicle in a row of identical tiny cubicles any longer. It was now a small office. An office all his own. Had it always been that, he began to wonder. Midge didn't care either way and practically shoved him inside the office. "Well, where is it?" she impatiently demanded. Alex walked up to his computer. It was still on, displaying the document on the screen. However, he now saw that the document was blank. Nothing was written on it. He got flustered and confused, trying to explain that he had written. Midge wouldn't hear any of it, of course. She did not look happy. She figured Alex was playing some joke on her, or simply lazying around. If he thought the previous scolding he just got was bad, well, that was simply an appetizer. Midge yelled and screamed, threatening to have him fired if he didn't turn in the report within the next hour. All he could say was, "Yes, I'll get right on it." Meanwhile, he had to struggle not to grab his stapler and staple a stack of paper onto her forehead. Luckily for her, she left after only 5 full minutes of uninterrupted screaming. Alex then sat down by his desk and immediately began work on the report. This time it came more fluently, as he was more confident what to actually write. An hour or so later, he was done. That's when it knocked on his door. "Come in," he said. The door opened and there stood Midge. Who else? Now Midge looked entirely different though. She didn't look like Midge, and she also didn't look like his ex-girlfriend Sarah. He wasn't quite sure who this woman was supposed to be. Had he seen her before? In some way she seemed familiar, yet he couldn't place her. One thing was sure though, Alex was incredibly attracted to her. Whoever she was, this version of Midge was basically his dream girl, appearance-wise. Midge herself, the real Midge that is, had curly light brown hair, while Sarah had medium-length blonde hair. This new Midge had long, straight, raven black hair and olive skin. Her eyes were big and dark gold. Alex felt excitement rise just by looking at her. She asked about the report. It was time to turn it in. "Here it is," he said as he clicked print, and the report began to materialize from a printer right next to her. When it was done, she picked it up and quickly glanced at it. It was fine work, she said, then tossed it away. Fine work indeed. Alex deserved a reward for his fine job, she said, as she moved closer. He wasn't quite sure what she was getting at, but then it became pretty clear when Midge began to unbutton the top of her blouse. His eyes grew wide. She slowly moved in closer, her big, dark, golden eyes trained on him. Then the blouse was discarded entirely and she pressed herself against him. Their lips touched and he felt her warm hand slide in underneath his shirt. The hand then began to carefully move down, and Then it knocked loudly on the door, or rather someone banged on the door. Whoever it was didn't care to wait for Alex to reply and simply barged in before he could open his mouth. It was Midge, the other Midge, the real Midge this time. She stood by the door and looked pretty pissed, completely ignoring the half-naked dream girl Midge in Alex's arms. She began to bark at him about something he was supposed to do. Go to Clark's office and fetch a document. What? Clark's office? Now? Alex was kind of in the middle of something here. Couldn't this wait? Midge, the angry one by the door that is, looked as if she wanted to kill him. If he didn't go to Clark's office and fetch that goddamn document right away, he was fired. Fine, he said, shoving the half-naked Midge away from him. He told her this would only take a minute and he would be right back. Then they would continue what they were doing. Alex then rushed off, practically running to Clark's office. He found it empty, no Clark around. There was a big document lying square on his desk, however. In fact, it was the only thing on his desk. Alex picked it up and hurried back to his office. The angry Midge was gone, but Dream Girl Midge was thankfully still there, leaning against his desk, still half naked. Alex had no idea what he was supposed to do with Clark's document, but whatever, and threw it onto his desk. He then moved up against Dream Girl Midge and grabbed her in his arms. Their smooching proceeded, and once again he felt her hand move slowly down south. But then it banged loudly on the door again. Alex turned away from his girl and yelled out, "What?" It was Midge. She looked as if she wanted to murder him. Diana had misplaced her stapler and needed to borrow his, she barked. "Now, or you're fired!" Stapler? Who cares about some damn stapler? Still, Alex once again shoved his dream girl away and hurried out of his office, with stapler in hand. He sprinted to Diana's office and found hers empty too. He placed the stapler on her desk, then ran back. Alex was pleased to find his dream girl still there and Midge gone. With no time to waste, he practically threw himself at her and began to rip at what little clothing she still had on. She pressed her lips against his and once again slowly traced her hand alongside his chest, downwards, going down, and then it banged on the door again. Midge, of course. He knew it even before she began to yell. Apparently the restroom on their floor was all out of toilet paper. Alex was to go to the janitorial quarters and tell them about it. Or he was fired. He began to fume. Midge just wouldn't leave them alone, would she? She would keep this up for all eternity, denying Alex what he so desired. Something had to be done. It had to end now. He then got an idea, a brilliant idea of how to get rid of Midge once and for all. It was so obvious, he should have done it long ago even. Alex moved away from the practically all-nude woman and with a coy smile addressed Midge by the door. He told her that there was something he needed to show her at his apartment. A box of documents that simply could not wait. He'd brought them home and worked on them there on his spare time. That's how good of an employee he was. It was best if Midge followed him home now and looked at them there. After all, he said, glancing at his watch, hauling that oversized box all the way here would consume far too much time. The workday was almost over. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, Midge thought it all sounded logical and thus agreed. Alex's coy smile turned into an outright sinister one. He then turned to the naked lady and told her to be patient. He'd be back eventually. She just had to wait. "Don't go anywhere," he said. She gazed at him seductively and promised she wouldn't. Alex and Midge were then off, on their way to his apartment. The elevator ride down went just as fast as it had gone up. In no time at all, they had traveled from the 42nd floor to ground level. The reception was still abandoned. Alex briefly considered asking Midge where the hell everyone was, but dismissed the thought. The city outside was still abandoned too, except for by noise, of course. The two were naturally going to walk to Alex's apartment. For some reason, this time it went a lot faster, not even half the time. In fact, they were there in barely 20 minutes. His apartment simply seemed to be located much closer now. His apartment was now on the ground floor, not on the 3rd floor as it had been when he left for work that morning. Alex didn't really think anything of it. It all seemed pretty normal. Besides, he had more important things on his mind. Getting rid of Midge, so he could finally continue with the other Midge back at his office. He opened his apartment door for her like a gentleman and allowed her to enter first. Closing the door behind him, Alex led the way to the supposed box of documents. There was no box of documents, of course. Instead, Alex had, precisely according to plan, led her straight to his closet. "Well, where is it?" Mitch barked. "In here," he said, pointing at the closed closet door. He then said he had to go to the bathroom and that meanwhile she could help herself to the box. Before she could protest, Alex left her and entered his bathroom, locking the door behind him. Mitch stood there for a brief while, staring at the closed closet door and cursed silently. She then reluctantly opened it. It was completely dark in there. "I can't see it," she yelled. "Oh, it's in there," Alex answered from inside the bathroom. "Just step inside. It's on the floor in the back." Mitch cursed silently again. Why the hell was she doing this again? Alex had his ear pressed against the bathroom door and listened intently. Mitch then stepped inside the closet, feeling around with her foot for the supposed box on the floor. Nothing was there, which is exactly what she yelled out to Alex, annoyed out of her mind. But then her foot did hit something. It didn't feel like a cardboard box though, it was soft, wet and slimy. A low, animalistic gurgling noise was then emitted from the dark shadows. Mitch leaned forwards, trying to see what it was, calling out to Alex, asking if he had an animal in there. Alex then rushed out of the bathroom and slammed the closet door shut. Mitch did obviously not respond very well to this. She banged on the door and barked and shouted, commanding that he let her out. Soon another noise rose from within the closet, not coming from Mitch, but from her friend in there. An alien roar. Mitch's angry commands turned into terrified pleas and her barks transformed into screams. More force was pressed against the closet door and Alex had to use his entire body to keep it shut. The screaming and roaring continued for a good 10 minutes, until they were finally replaced by the sounds of slurping and chewing. Alex moved away from the door, wiping the sweat off of his forehead. Part of him wanted to open the door and see the mangled remains of Mitch, but he figured it best to refrain. Let the monster be with its dinner. Who knows, now that it had been fed, it might actually leave and move on to somewhere else. Of course his clothes must have been covered in Mitch's blood, so we had to get new ones anyway. Oh well, none of that really mattered now. Now it was time to get back to the office. Finally. He got so excited thinking of what awaited him there, he ran all the way back to the office building. He couldn't wait, couldn't contain himself. Upon reaching the 42nd floor, he stormed through the hallways, looking for his office. It didn't seem to be where it had been last time. Where the hell was it? Alex ran down every single hallway on the entire floor, checking every office. None of them were his and none of them contained the naked lady. He called out her name, Mitch he guessed it was, but got no answer. No one was there but him. Desperate, Alex got into the elevator and went down to the 41st floor. He did the same thing there, went down every single hallway and checked every single office. He couldn't find anything there either. Not his office, nor the girl, or anyone else for that matter. Alex ended up checking every single floor in the entire building, all 65 of them, but couldn't find a single trace of anything or anyone. Just empty offices and cubicles, none of them which were his. The whole mad search took him about 10 hours. Reluctantly, in the end, he had to admit defeat and accept the fact he wasn't going to get the dream girl Mitch. Alex certainly wasn't happy about it. Nevertheless, he went home anyway. Not too long after that, maybe a couple of days or maybe a week, aliens stormed his apartment and kidnapped him, bringing him to their spaceship. He was then thrown in a cell where he was visited by his father. That last part I can explain, of course. The aliens were in fact police officers who arrested Alex and took him into custody. His neighbors had complained about a horrible smell coming from his apartment, and the landlord eventually checked it out while Alex was away. What the landlord found in there, causing that awful smell, was a corpse of Midge. The real Midge, that is. Alex's supervisor at the advertisement firm he worked at. She was stuffed inside his closet, raped and murdered. Trying to explain this to Alex is of course completely meaningless. He had no clue he was ever even on trial, which made the final verdict pretty easy. Psychiatric care at Hillbrook Asylum. I told you he was a marvel, didn't I? Simply astonishing. This is medical history we're making here. A man who constantly lives inside a dream world. I'm naturally dying to find out just what makes that brain of his tick. So I asked Dr. Millers to prepare an operation on patient 297. Together we are going to find the answers. And what better way to do that than by taking a look inside that brain? Barry, get me my saw.